One late night at the office, my boss whispered a secret that could change everything, and in that silence, I promised to keep it forever. The office was never meant to feel this quiet. By 8 o'clock, most desks sat empty, computer screens dark, and the usual rhythm of ringing phones and clicking keyboards had faded into memory. I was finishing up a report when I noticed the glow from my boss's corner office. Her light was still on, blinds half drawn against the city night. Normally, I would have packed my bag and left without a second thought. She was my superior, brilliant, composed, untouchable. But tonight, her voice drifted across the open space. Low, steady, carrying just enough weight to pull me in. "Stay a moment," she said. I froze for half a second, then walked toward her door. She wasn't sitting behind her desk in the usual commanding way. Instead, she stood near the window, arms crossed, her silhouette outlined by the faint reflection of skyscraper lights outside. For the first time, she looked less like the woman who led board meetings and more like someone wrestling with thoughts she didn't want to share. "Close the door." Her voice was soft but deliberate. I obeyed, the faint click of the door sealing us off from the rest of the world. Suddenly, the room felt smaller, the air heavier. She turned, and I noticed her eyes. They didn't carry the usual sharpness of authority, they carried something else. Hesitation. Vulnerability. She walked toward her desk, fingertips brushing lightly against the polished wood as if grounding herself. Then she leaned closer, lowering her voice until it was almost a breath. "This meeting stays between us." The words lingered in the air. Not an order, not a request, something in between. My heart thudded louder, and I nodded slowly, unsure of what she was about to reveal but certain it mattered. For a brief moment, silence filled the room. The hum of the air conditioner, the faint buzz of city traffic below, it all seemed far away. What I felt instead was the weight of her trust pressing onto me. I sat across from her, but the desk no longer felt like a barrier. It felt like a line we had both quietly agreed to cross, though neither of us had moved. She rested her hands flat on the desk, and I noticed the smallest tremor in her fingers. Not fear, exactly, more like the release of a long-held restraint. That was the night I realized, this wasn't just another late meeting. This was the start of something unspoken, something neither of us fully understood, but both of us felt. She sat down slowly, as if the weight of her own thoughts pressed on her shoulders. For years, I had only known her as the woman who commanded every room she entered. She had a reputation for precision, for knowing the right words to cut through any hesitation, the kind of presence that made everyone else fall silent. But tonight, in this quiet office with no witnesses, something in her seemed different. Her hands, usually steady as she shuffled through contracts or signed off on projects, clasped together tightly, fingers interlaced in a grip that looked almost defensive. She didn't look at me at first. Instead, she let her eyes fall to the stack of papers on her desk, tracing the edges as if they could give her strength. "I don't usually do this," she said finally, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "I don't let people see the other side of me." I leaned forward, not speaking, letting the space between us fill with patience. I could feel she needed silence more than interruption. She glanced up, and her eyes held mine for a moment before flickering away again. "You see me in meetings. Strong. Certain. Always ready with an answer. That's the version everyone thinks is unshakable." She gave a short, dry laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "But what they don't see, is how isolating it is. The responsibility. The pressure. The way people stop looking at you as a person and only see the position you hold." Her words sank into me. I hadn't expected this. I'd thought maybe she wanted to discuss a project, or perhaps share a confidential strategy. But instead, here she was, pulling back a curtain I didn't know existed. She pressed her lips together, as though she was debating whether to continue. I didn't rush her. I simply nodded, letting her know I was listening, fully present. "Sometimes," she whispered, I wonder if anyone even remembers that I get tired. That I can be lonely. Something shifted inside me. She wasn't my boss in that moment. She was a woman, still strong, but suddenly human, fragile in a way she rarely let anyone see. Her fingers finally relaxed, and her shoulders dropped slightly, as though unburdened by speaking the words aloud. The silence afterward wasn't awkward. It was heavy, meaningful, a space where trust had just been planted. And I realized, she hadn't just chosen anyone to share this with. She had chosen me. The air felt warmer now, though the office temperature hadn't changed. It was the kind of warmth that comes when walls between two people begin to lower, when guarded silences turn into confessions. She leaned back in her chair, her shoulders easing against the leather, and for the first time since I'd known her, she seemed less like an authority figure and more like a person simply searching for connection. Her voice carried a fragile honesty. You know, people assume I have everything figured out. They think the title means I don't doubt myself, that I don't second-guess decisions at 3 a.m. But the truth is, sometimes I feel like I'm standing on a ledge, and if I take one wrong step, everything I've built will collapse. I let her words settle. Then, carefully, I offered my own truth. I know that feeling, though in a different way. People see my age and think I can't possibly be serious, or ready, or capable of more than just carrying out instructions. They underestimate me before I even open my mouth. She tilted her head, listening closely. For a moment, I caught the flicker of recognition in her eyes, like she understood more than she wanted to admit. I never thought of it that way, she murmured. You feel dismissed because of youth. I feel dismissed because people see only my role. The connection threaded itself between us, invisible but undeniable. I slid a file across the desk to illustrate my point, and as she reached to take it, our hands brushed. Just skin against skin, nothing deliberate, but it was enough. Enough for me to notice the warmth of her fingertips, the way she didn't immediately withdraw. Her hand lingered a second too long, and though neither of us acknowledged it aloud, the silence after that touch said more than words could. Her lips curved into a faint smile, but her eyes held something deeper, curiosity, maybe even relief. Funny, she said, her voice gentler now. I've never shared any of this with anyone. I don't know why I'm telling you. I swallowed, my pulse quickening. Maybe because you needed someone who'd understand without judgment. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded as if confirming something to herself. That night, the secrecy she had demanded at the beginning of the meeting began to take on a new meaning. It wasn't just about protecting professional boundaries. It was about preserving the fragile space we had created, a place where two very different lives could meet in truth, if only for a few stolen hours. The conversation drifted into a stillness that felt heavier than anything we had spoken. She had revealed pieces of herself that I knew she rarely let anyone see, and I had answered with truths of my own. Now, in the silence, it felt like both of us were waiting for something neither of us dared to name. Her gaze dropped to the papers on the desk, but she didn't really see them. I could tell by the way her fingertips rested lightly on the page, unmoving, as though she was lost somewhere else. Slowly, she lifted her eyes, and when they found mine, the air in the room shifted. There was no sharpness in her expression, no hint of the authority she usually carried so effortlessly. Instead, there was hesitation, mixed with a kind of longing. The kind of look that holds back more than it reveals, but still says enough to make your pulse quicken. I leaned forward slightly, careful not to break the fragile atmosphere. She didn't lean back. Instead, her lips parted as if she was about to speak, then closed again. That pause, those unspoken words, held more weight than anything else that night. My voice came out low, steady, softer than I intended. You can trust me. The word seemed to land between us, filling the space she had left open. She inhaled slowly, her chest rising as if she had been holding her breath. Her eyes didn't leave mine, and in that suspended moment, the silence carried more than language ever could. I noticed the smallest details, the way a strand of her hair slipped loose and fell near her cheek, the faint tremor in her fingers, the subtle flush along her neck. These weren't signs of weakness. They were signs of a woman who had built walls for years and was, for the first time, lowering them in front of someone who wasn't supposed to be this close. The hum of the air conditioning grew louder in the absence of words. Even the city traffic below seemed muted, as though the world outside had no right to intrude on this moment. We sat there, eyes locked, the desk still between us but feeling less like a barrier and more like a thread pulling us closer. The longer the silence lasted, the more charged it became, like lightning waiting for the sky to split. But neither of us crossed the line. Not yet. Instead, we stayed in that whispered pause, both knowing that something had shifted, though neither dared to give it a name. The pause between us stretched until she finally shifted in her chair, as if the silence had grown too heavy to hold. She stood, walked around the desk, and pulled her laptop closer to where I sat. "Let's look at this together," she said, her tone carefully neutral, though her movements carried a quiet hesitancy. I nodded, adjusting my chair to give her space as she sat down beside me. For the first time, we weren't separated by a desk or the roles we carried during the day. For the first time, she was close, closer than she had ever allowed herself to be. The glow of the laptop screen cast a soft light across her face. I caught the way her lashes flickered when she leaned in, the faint crease of concentration between her brows. Our shoulders brushed lightly as we both looked at the same page. It was nothing deliberate, nothing bold, but the touch lingered, igniting a current I couldn't ignore. She scrolled slowly, her hand steady at first, then faltering for just a fraction of a second. I noticed it, a small tremor, the kind that comes when emotions wrestle with composure. Without thinking, I reached out and gently steadied her wrist, my fingers curling softly around her skin. The effect was instant. She stilled, her hand resting beneath mine, warm and tense all at once. Her eyes flicked sideways toward me, and for a heartbeat we stayed like that, connected by nothing more than a quiet touch that spoke louder than words. I withdrew slowly, not wanting to push, but the space between us no longer felt the same. Something had shifted. "You're calmer than most people I know," she murmured, her eyes still on the screen but her voice carrying a weight of unspoken admiration. I gave a small smile. "Maybe that's because I don't see you as untouchable. Just human." Her lips curved slightly, but she didn't look at me. Instead, she tilted the screen toward me, as though hiding her face behind the glow. Yet I caught the faintest smile tugging at her expression, a softness I had never seen during the day. The desk, the office, even the glowing charts on the laptop, they all faded in that moment. What mattered was the nearness, the shared warmth of being shoulder to shoulder, the invisible line between us blurring just enough to make both of us aware of how fragile, how dangerous, and how irresistible this connection was becoming. The silence between us had become something alive, pulsing with a rhythm neither of us could control. We were still side by side, the laptop screen glowing faintly, but neither of us paid attention to the numbers and charts anymore. What mattered was the nearness, the way her sleeve brushed against my arm each time she shifted, the way her breath lingered in the space between us. She exhaled slowly, almost as if bracing herself. "I shouldn't be saying this," she whispered, her voice so soft I had to lean closer just to hear. Her eyes remained fixed on the screen, as though the courage to speak could only come if she didn't look directly at me. "But I feel at ease with you. In a way I haven't in years." Her admission sent a shiver down my spine. This woman who led rooms full of executives without faltering was now confessing something delicate, something private, only inches away from me. I didn't rush to respond. I let the weight of her words breathe between us, knowing she needed silence more than reassurance. Finally, I spoke quietly, steady enough to show I understood. "Then let this be your space to breathe. Whatever you share stays here, with me." Her lips curved faintly, not quite a smile but a soft acknowledgement. At last, her eyes turned to mine, and for a heartbeat the world outside the office ceased to exist. The city, the traffic, the hierarchy of titles, it all dissolved until it was just her and me. "I can't afford distractions," she said, her gaze steady yet conflicted. "But you make it hard to remember where the lines are." Her words landed like a spark in dry air. The honesty in them, the vulnerability, they deepened the tension without either of us moving an inch. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. Then maybe it isn't about crossing lines. Maybe it's about trusting someone enough to stand here with you, even on the edge. Her breath caught, her chest rising sharply before she looked away again, retreating into the safety of restraint. "You don't realize what it means for me to admit this," she murmured. I leaned just slightly closer, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'll keep every secret. Not just this meeting, all of it." Her eyes softened, and a fragile smile appeared, touched with relief and danger both. The moment felt like standing at the edge of something irreversible. But neither of us stepped forward. Not yet. Instead, we let the confession hang there, unguarded, undeniable, knowing that holding back was the only way to protect what was already unfolding between us. The clock on the wall ticked softly, reminding us that time hadn't stopped, even though it felt like it had. She closed the laptop with deliberate care, as if shutting it would also contain everything we had just confessed. For a moment, she stayed seated beside me, her hands resting lightly on the smooth surface of the desk. Then she drew in a breath, slow and steady, and stood. I rose with her, the distance between us stretching again, though the air still carried the weight of what had been spoken. She gathered a few papers from her desk, sliding them into a folder with hands that moved a little too slowly, as though stalling. I watched her movements, memorizing every detail, the graceful tilt of her head, the faint shadow of tiredness beneath her eyes, the quiet strength in the way she carried herself even when her guard was lowered. When she finally turned toward me, the room seemed to narrow around us. She held the folder close to her chest, almost like a shield, but her eyes betrayed her. They lingered on me a moment too long, carrying a softness that didn't belong to a late-night office meeting. "This stays between us," she repeated, her voice gentler now, no longer the whispered command it had been at the beginning. It was a plea, fragile and human. I nodded, my reply quiet but certain. "I told you, I'll keep every secret." The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was warm, threaded with something unspoken, something we both recognized but didn't dare name aloud. She walked toward the door, her heels clicking softly against the floor, but before stepping out, she hesitated. Her hand rested on the handle, and she turned back one last time. The city lights framed her in the doorway, casting her figure in soft contrast. Her lips parted slightly, as if she might add something, but instead she only offered a faint, knowing smile. One that said more than words could carry. Then she was gone. I stood there for a while, the echo of her presence still filling the room. The desk, the laptop, the folder she'd held, they all felt like props left behind after a scene had ended. But the memory of her eyes, her voice, her whispered admission, that stayed with me. When I finally walked out of the office, the city air felt different. I carried nothing in my hands, but everything in my chest. A secret not written in reports or files, but in the quiet bond between us. A bond that no one else would ever know existed, except her and me.